Hi everyone! Today's video is all about high-functioning BPD. In the end, I would also tell you what to do about it.
In recent years, mental health awareness about borderline personality disorder has increased significantly. Although BPD is still highly stigmatized, more people are aware of its debilitating effect and the need to offer sufferers support before it is too late. Having high-functioning BPD or quiet BPD, however, can mean you have suffered for years in silence without anyone ever noticing or reaching out to help. In the same way that no two people are alike, no two people with BPD symptoms are alike. The spectrum of different signs and the considerable diversity amongst BPD sufferers can be misleading. Since most people are only aware of what a stereotypical person with BPD looks like, those who act in, instead of act out their pain are often neglected and left to suffer in silence. Within the mental health system, those with the most dramatic, externalized symptoms, such as violent behaviors or suicidality, are prioritized. Many professionals, especially when operating under the pressure of high caseloads and limited resources, forget to spare a thought for those with high-functioning borderline personality disorder, also known as high-functioning BPD.
When you have high-functioning BPD, you may not demonstrate stereotypical symptoms like anger outbursts all the time. You may be able to hold down a job or sustain friendships. Your BPD symptoms come out only in pockets, in certain relationships or when triggered by particular events. On the surface, you may be calm, friendly, efficient. Others may see you as a confident and competent person at work, but behind the scenes, you suffer from intense shame and self-hate. It may be that your arms and legs are covered with scars from self-harming, but most people only see the positive image you show the world. Many people with high-functioning BPD have the experience of going through a mental health assessment with a psychiatrist or social worker in the public health system, only to be told that they are not sick enough to receive any follow-up. Unfortunately, this can re-traumatize them and reinforce the beliefs and schemas that are keeping them in isolation in the first place. They are further convinced that they are not worthy of help, other people should be a priority, and that they ought to feel guilty for having reached out. The psychological dynamics of high-functioning BPD. We cannot make brushstroke statements about how anyone with high-functioning BPD would look, behave, or feel. High-functioning BPD is the result of multiple complex psychological mechanisms, such as a split of ego states, dissociation, experiential avoidance, and fear of anger. Here in this audio essay, we will address some of these psychological mechanisms that cause and perpetuate high-functioning BPD. If you suspect this is what you have, I hope some of the following information will be helpful to you. How does high-functioning BPD begin? Most people who suffer from BPD have experienced complex trauma in their childhood. Unlike shock trauma that can be seen and clearly defined, you may have been emotionally abused, chronically neglected, dragged into dysfunctional family dynamics, or burdened with too many responsibilities. Even if no one had intentionally tried to hurt you, you might have witnessed physical or verbal violence or experienced early separation trauma. Just because what you have suffered is invisible does not make it illegitimate. When your psyche is burdened with too much, too soon, it has to find a way to cope. One way of doing this is to create a split in your psyche, so a part of you is given the task of carrying and containing the overwhelming trauma, while the rest of you can go on with life as though things are normal. After the psychic split, the traumatized part of you stays stuck and regressed like a little child. This part of you is frozen in shock and confusion. It has the emotional reality and cognitive ability of a child. They are not confident in the world, feel scared to leave the house and avoid facing people's judgment. They do not have the ability to grasp abstract concepts, are intolerant of ambiguity, and perceive the world in a black and white manner. They are perpetually anxious and confused. You may see yourself feeling or acting in these ways when you are emotionally triggered, or in times of extreme stress. The other part of you, however, becomes overdeveloped. Like a brave soldier, it leaps into adulthood and marches on with life. This part of you is productive, efficient, ambitious, and competent. They are highly responsible and overly grown up. Believing that there is no one they can trust in the world, they absolutely have to stand on their own 2 feet. Their identity of being a strong person is what they count on for a sense of security. The difficulty with high-functioning BPD is that people only see the competent, normal part of you. Since our society praises, encourages, and reinforces that, it is easy for it to become the default mask you wear in the world. When there is parentification in the family, a role reversal between you and your parents, being highly competent is the way you win love and recognition. Your high-functioning side knows it carries the job of keeping you safe in the world, so it has no choice but to work harder and stay tough, even at the hefty price of foregoing spontaneity, intimacy, and creativity. With a split in your psyche, you raise the conundrum of having a mind that is capable of intellectually understanding what's going on, and emotions that are disproportionately reactive to distressing triggers. Behind the scenes, you may have social anxiety, agoraphobia, uncontrollable rage, unexpected bursts of depression, addiction, and compulsive tendencies. These symptoms erupt when you are on your own or when you let your guard down, but you are left to deal with them in isolation. They are, in essence, the voice of your inner scared child. They are trying to reach out, protest, and seek your attention. Unfortunately, the high-functioning side of you has become far too competent at pushing down her needs. Eventually, the gulf in your psyche between the 2 sides widens, and the wounds of your inner child become further hidden. But just because your hurt and rage are suppressed does not mean they have disappeared. Without a healthy channel for your wounds to be processed, digested, and let out, they become increasingly poisonous to you. Just like a house that has been infested, no one sees what has been slowly rotting until the pillars break and the ceiling falls. Until the day you collapse in a crisis, most people do not see your vulnerability and how much it takes for you to put on a stoic face. Counterdependency as a defense. Counterdependency is a hallmark symptom of high-functioning BPD. Most people have heard of codependency, which normally refers to a dysfunctional and enmeshed relationship between 2 people, where one person is overly responsible for the other's emotional world, creating a merger between the 2 psyches. Counterdependency can be thought of as the other side of the coin, as it often begins as a defense against being engulfed and subsumed by others. In counterdependency, you become incredibly self-reliant, so much so that it is unthinkable that anyone would be there to take care of you and to comfort you. In fact, having to be dependent on anyone makes you feel unsafe and overly exposed. The root of counterdependency is the fear of annihilation. On the one hand, you fear that if anyone comes too close to you, you will be too attached and lose yourself. It could be that you had very vulnerable, needy, and overbearing parents, and that their need to intrude on your life caused you to feel engulfed for the first half of your life. Perhaps they had a need to be one with you, or their dependency on you robbed you of life opportunities. Thus, you now do anything you can to keep people at arm's length to avoid losing your personal space or freedom. On the other hand, counterdependency can also result from repeated disappointment in childhood. If your parents were cold, unemotional, and neglectful, you would have learned from an early age that there is no point in reaching out or seeking help. You might have cried and protested, but were only ever met with coldness, hostility, or abandonment. A resulting worldview is that you are ultimately alone in this precarious world, and no one can be trusted or leaned on. You therefore believe you must at all times stand on your own 2 feet. You would not allow your high-functioning facade to crumble, for you fear that once a crack of weakness is revealed, others will take advantage of you and threaten your independence. The next symptom of high-functioning BPD is emotional and intimacy anorexia. Another core mechanism that drives high-functioning BPD is what we call emotional anorexia. It refers to the difficulties in or refusal to take in necessary nourishment from love and kinship. This may be because deep down, you do not believe you deserve to be loved. On the surface, you are friendly and open, but when examined closely, you seem only to choose people who are emotionally shut down or not ready to commit. When others are nice to you, offering you praise or compliments, it feels uncomfortable, even unsafe to believe them. Many people who suffer from BPD are innately sensitive and empathic. Perhaps from a young age, you have had the repeated experience of being the one who loves too much, gives too much, and commits too much. Having been hurt so many times, you now opt to restrain your passion. Your inability to trust intimacy and positive rewards acts as a shield against disappointment. The subconscious belief is that if you don't allow yourself to be hooked, you will never become overly attached, and you will not be hurt. Underneath emotional anorexia might also be the unconscious belief that your emotions are bad, you are too much for others, your existence itself is a burden, or you don't deserve a place in the world. So now, you would rather be in pain than to affect other people, so you hold everything in. You feel lonely, but you deny your own need for attachment. However much you want to have normal relationships like everyone else, it feels too risky to love and let love in. Rather than risk being hurt again, you would rather stay in a state of deprivation. Unfortunately, by being anorexic to love and affection, you are neglecting to see the gifts and qualities that others see in you. Even when others are genuinely drawn to you, they are not given a chance to get to know you. Symptom number 3. An invisible emptiness. Many people with BPD are innately highly sensitive and empathic. From a young age, you love and feel a lot. Sadly, your sensitivity and empathy might have been abused rather than honored. Adults in your life might have used you to be their emotional caretaker and counselor, and people might have scapegoated you for your differences. If you have felt overwhelmed by intense hurt in the past, it is not surprising that to protect yourself, you have learned to do the opposite of being sensitive, to stop feeling. As a child, you had little choice in where you lived or went to school. If your family was abusive to you or if your peers bullied you, you had no escape. Cutting yourself off from your feelings is the only escape. Alongside chronic emptiness, you may also suffer from derealization or depersonalization. This means that you feel dissociated from your own body, as though you are floating above yourself. To cut yourself off from negative feelings, you may have resorted to using addictive substances or behaviors as a part of your dissociative strategies. Eating, alcohol, compulsive behaviors, and repetitive rituals can become addictive because they function to fill an inner void. You may also have selective amnesia, where you have unconsciously forgotten negative events in your early life and can recall little about your childhood. With chronic emptiness, you are watching your life go by without living it. Despite your heart's yearning to feel alive again, whenever you try to open up, you hit a wall. Ironically, the deep sadness and loneliness that comes from such a non-living state can be as painful as, if not more painful than, the original emotional turmoil that you are trying to avoid. High-functioning BPD. Are you waving or drowning? The predicament of someone with high-functioning BPD is captured in a poem by British poet Stevie Smith called Not Waving but Drowning.
Nobody heard him, the dead man. But still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought. And not waving but drowning.
As it is poignantly put by this poem, your heart may be aching, and you may be drowning in sorrow, but every person who sees your arm thrashing above water thinks you are just waving. At the root of high-functioning BPD is a dismemberment with a part of yourself. You have dislodged the part of you that is vulnerable, hurt and angry to the basement of your psyche, and you pretend that it was never there. Because you initiated this split, things become furthermore polarized. Your inner BPD is forced to hold all the wounds, sorrow and rage, while the tough part of you gets increasingly rigid and cold. High-functioning BPD is a battle between your ego and your true self. Being dominated by your ego consciousness, you feel the need to be in control all of the time. You fear that once you let in a crack, your wall will break down and you will be completely exposed. You fear that once you let in a teardrop, it will never stop and you will be subsumed by a tsunami of feelings. Underneath, you fear disintegration and losing any sense of who you are. Therefore, the first step to healing is learning to trust yourself. You are no longer a helpless child, and you are now capable of much more. Taking a compassionate stance, you can expand your window of tolerance for a wider spectrum of life experience, both positive and negative, intense and mundane, fleeting and long-lasting. Right now, see if you can slow down, soften your heart, and hear from the part of you that you have shoved into the shadows. At first, this may be a daunting idea, but soon you will realize it is not more difficult than nurturing a hurting child. The part of you that has been split off, that is, your splinter personality, is waiting to be remembered, reintegrated and reaccepted into your inner family. Like a hungry child, they sometimes cry, sometimes yell and sometimes protest to get your attention. You may resent and reject these parts, and wish they would just go away, but does your soul really want to inflict further pain? If you walk past a desolate, crying child on the street, knowing they are starving for love, can you find compassion in your heart? There is a weeping child in you. Rather than condemning them for being needy and intense, you can turn to them, speak to them, understand them, and comfort them. Your main task in life is not to perpetuate what was once done to you, including the cruelty, misunderstanding, and neglect, but to become a better parent, friend, and companion to yourself. Once you have adopted a befriending stance, these crying demons will be transformed. Instead of erupting as depression and rage, they will become friendly messengers from your psyche, signaling you to slow down when you need to rest, reminding you to soften when you want to wall up, allowing you to be spontaneous when your soul wants to be expressive. At the end of this alchemical process, you will regain your ability to love, to soften, to connect with others, and to feel alive.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I hope that some of the pieces in this audio essay are useful to you. You may also want to share it with some of your friends and families so they can have a better understanding of what you're going through. Please feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And if there are specific topics that you want me to talk about, please let me know also. I would also absolutely love it if you can subscribe to this channel. Alright then, until next time.